Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Corman, and I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of the UIC Alumni Association. Welcome to the UIC Alumni Exchange Series. We have a great lineup planned for you in 2021, and whether this is your first Alumni Exchange program or your fifth or your 10th, we are continuing to work hard to bring you a variety of programs and topics so you can explore, connect, and even escape from the everyday with a community of UIC faculty, alumni, and staff experts. You'll hear me say this a few times today, but I encourage you to visit go.uic.edu/alumni exchange for the latest and greatest programming. And with that, I'm excited to start our program this afternoon, featuring a panel of faculty experts from our UIC College of Education as they present strategies for supporting children and families' social and emotional health during turbulent times. I'm joined today by 4 members of our faculty from the Department of Educational Psychology, and I'm pleased to introduce you to them. First is Professor and Senior Lecturer Kathy Maine, Chair and Associate Professor Dr. Kathy Sheridan, Assistant Professor Dr. Sari Koba, and Assistant Professor Dr. Marisha Humphreys. Thank you to each of our panelists for being here today and for spending your time and knowledge with us. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Maine to begin the program.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here and be part of this panel with my colleagues from the Department of Educational Psychology. I'm also really thrilled that folks are filling out our Padlet. It really helps us get an idea of some of the things you're thinking about and focus our discussion. So just in way of an introduction, the purpose of us being here today is really to talk a little bit about the role that you all have in helping children manage and survive these very turbulent times. And we specifically chose these words here about thinking about relationships, buffers, responsive, reassuring, and consistent. And so I noticed one of the first questions out there in the Padlet was about how can I help my nieces and nephews? So just as a parent, you also have relationships. And so you want to be thinking about what is my relationship and how do I create a secure relationship with children? And the secure relationship is so important because that's what really creates the buffer for children when they're trying to manage things that feel uncertain and scary. The words we have up here about responsive, reassuring, and consistent, we hope that you'll leave this presentation with thinking a lot about what it means to be responsive. And that sort of starts with really watching and listening to your watching your children's cues and listening to what they say. Reassuring is another really important word here, and it has a lot to do with your own emotional state and your sense of calmness and what you do. But another way that you also can be really reassuring to children is through consistency. And so we're going to also spend some time with some tips and some ideas about how to really be consistent through routines and rituals. So we hope that today's presentation really provides you with certain tips and the guidance that is helpful to you and your family. And I see we even have some teachers out here. I think a lot of this also can apply directly to children in your classroom. And so we wanted to run a quick poll also before we jump in, just so we have some ideas about the ages of the children that you might have in your care, so we can focus our presentation for you. So thanks for filling out that poll, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathy Sheridan, who's going to talk about COVID and children's responses to that.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to discuss how we can be supportive of our children and families during this difficult time. Today, I'm going to focus my remarks around the topic of how best to support our children's emotional well-being around their fears about COVID-19 germs and illnesses. Illness and germs are a frightening reality today, and this reality impacts children of all ages. And on this slide, I've listed some overarching actions you can take that are effective in supporting children at any age. You see the first two, ask children what they've heard or know and ask them how they feel. Those involve listening. And so that's a very important thing for us to do today to kids of all ages, is to talk with them and listen. And then by listening, we can share only the information that they need to know right now. And our answers should be simple and honest. We can offer reassurances, and we can explain the things that they can do to be safe. On these next slides, I address how we can talk to children about COVID-19 based on their age grouping. So I'm going to start with the youngest children, children 5 and under. Children in this age group are still deeply rooted in what they can actually see and feel, the actual physical world around them. And when we talk to children in this age grouping about their concepts of illness, they tend to display an understanding that is vague and often believe that the causes of illness are somewhat magical. So when children ask us questions about COVID-19 or any illness, we have to listen carefully to what they're saying, because we want to be sure that we limit the information we give them to what they're actually asking us. And when we respond, we want to use simple logic and understandable language to answer their questions. A recent study that explored children's social and emotional representations of the COVID-19 pandemic revealed that young children often view COVID as the enemy, something that's dangerous to them. So we're going to watch this short video of a 4-year-old answering questions about COVID, and you'll see that he describes COVID as something dangerous. And while he doesn't use that word dangerous, he uses a word that he knows means something dangerous. So let's watch the video. Go to it here.
Hi, what's your name?
Charlie,
How old are you?
4.
Okay, Charlie, what do you know about COVID?
I know when we're outside, if it's crowded, we have to wear a mask
Do you know why we have to wear a mask?
because of the coronavirus.
What is the coronavirus?
It's the sickness.
It's a sickness.
Yeah.
How do you know that the coronavirus is a sickness?
Because it's kind of like poison, but it's not.
It's kind of like poison, but it's not. When you think about COVID, do you have a picture in your head of what it looks like?
No.
No? Do you think it's something that has a color, or something that's invisible, or something that's really big, or something that's really small?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
That's okay. What do you think about wearing a mask?
Because I don't want to get sick.
That's why you wear it, because you don't want to get sick?
Yeah.
But what do you think about wearing it?
Like, so we could hug people and everything.
Okay, so you like to wear it so that we can hug people?
Yeah.
So do you like wearing a mask, or do you not like wearing a mask?
I kind of like wearing a mask because I like hugs and kisses. People that I don't really know and everything.
So where do you wear a mask?
At the playground or at my house if somebody's coming in, or outside in my backyard, or if somebody's coming in my backyard, or if we're playing in the film room with someone else, or if I'm playing with someone's toys, or
And what would happen if we went into a crowded place, or you went into school and you didn't wear a mask?
I'll get sick.
You'll get sick?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll definitely get sick if you don't wear a mask?
Yeah, because of the coronavirus. Because the coronavirus, it makes us sick, and it's not really good for us. We have bad germs too, but we have good germs inside our body.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What do the good germs do?
Help us be alive and everything.
Yeah. Are there other ways you can stay safe from COVID besides wearing a mask?
The good germs help us, and
Are there other things that we do besides wearing a mask to try to make sure we don't get sick?
hand sanitizer for our hands so we don't get sick when we come back inside. And can I tell them about my fingernails?
Sure. What about your fingernails?
I got them painted and my toenails.
I love your fingernail polish and your toenail polish.
Which one do you like mostly? This one or this one or this one?
I like all of them.
No, because look, 1, 2, so different colors.
Beautiful. All right, Charlie, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Bye.
So, did you notice that Charlie said that COVID was like poison, but not? See, poison was something he could relate to danger. He knows poison's bad because he's been told it is. And it's also clear that Charlie's understanding of COVID-19 and illness is somewhat vague. I mean, he can use the correct words like germs, good germs, bad germs, but he doesn't really have a deep understanding of what COVID or illness really is. The same study that I referred to earlier reported that young children had a much better understanding of an injury than they have of an illness. And that's because an injury is typically something that they can see or something that they can see and they know, they can tell what caused it. So it's just more real to them and it's less vague. Helping our kids understand that there are tools that they have to help them be safe helps them feel they have some control over this kind of magical thinking that they have about illness. And when you make these tools a part of your everyday routines, they actually really get adopted with this age group because 4 and 5-year-olds in particular are actually wonderful rule followers. Even 2-year-olds can accept rules and boundaries and routines readily. Let's watch this even shorter video where Charlie tells us about the tools he uses to stay safe. Got a lot of things open here, so gotta get to this one. And we'll make it big.
This is where the kids' masks belong. These are where the masks go. And we have really cool masks also. Like this one, like a tiger one. And these are the grown-up masks. I don't know why this one is, oh, yeah. These are the grown-up masks and these are the kid masks. And when we come inside, we use these hand sanitizers. Is this grown-up hand sanitizer?
Yeah.
So this is a grown-up hand sanitizer and this is kids hand sanitizer.
What are you holding in your hand? What's that blue thing?
It's my thing that I put mask on because it has some buttons in case so it pops right off so my neck doesn't break or this doesn't break. So these are the buttons.
Okay. So I stopped that video there, but if I would have kept on playing it, you would have heard Charlie go on then to describe the routine that he goes through every day. When he gets home from school, he says, well, I have to go right upstairs and I take off all my clothes and I put them in the wash and I get in the bathtub and I take a bath. And then I go downstairs and I watch a show and I eat dinner. And then I go upstairs and I brush my teeth again because he brushed them in the morning, get my pajamas on, I have a story, somebody lays with me till they tell me to go to sleep. And then I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning, and then he says at the end, and then I do everything all over again. So this understanding and anticipating this routine helps Charlie feel like he has some control and he feels reassured. And Dr. Koba is going to talk to us some more about routines in a few minutes and how helpful they are for children. Okay, so talking to children ages 6 to 9 is a little bit different because kids this age are a bit more sophisticated in their understanding of COVID-19 and illness. Kids of this age group have developed more understanding than the younger children, but they're still making sense of what they hear and are learning. So it's really important when they ask us a question to ask them what they think, because that way we can correct any misperceptions they might have. They might ask us questions at this age about what will happen if they get sick, and we can reassure them by comparing the symptoms to something they're familiar with and may have experienced before, like a cold or the flu. So once again, helping them develop safe routines is helping them gain some control over their fears. Kids in this age group aren't as rule bound as our 4 and 5-year-olds are. So we might have to remind them more often to use safe practices like wearing their masks and washing their hands. And I know it seems kind of counterintuitive because the older the kids are, the better they understand illness, but accepting rules changes depending on the developmental stage that you're at. Talking with teens and tweens, they often have many questions, and we obviously should answer them honestly, but we really have to try to focus on what their actual questions are. At this age, we might want to share articles and information about the virus, and certainly we want to address their social responsibility to take precautions. That earlier study also reported that teens and tweens were often scared they might give the virus to their grandparents. And you can help them with this fear by having them engage in safe health practices. They also reported that they felt conflicting emotions during this pandemic. They reported that they felt bored and angry and sad and scared, but they also said that they felt safe and happy and calm spending time with their families. For example, one 13-year-old boy said to his mother, "Hey, this social distancing thing is awesome. I don't have to put on pants for a whole month." But that same teen also may experience boredom or get angry about the social distancing thing. And that's just fine. Helping our kids understand and accept that these conflicting emotions are normal is something we can do for them as adults. We also have to remember that while teens and tweens can understand more about illness, it doesn't mean that they can always make good decisions, because the executive functioning area of the brain that helps us make decisions and make good decisions is really still developing during this age group. So while teens and tweens might understand more about the illness and about viruses and about transmission, they may still believe that they themselves won't be impacted by dangerous behavior. So it's really important to help our teens and tweens set boundaries and to keep our lines of communication open and to model appropriate behavior. And that's something we can all do to help children of every age. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Koba, and she's going to talk with us about family routines and rituals.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. If you could just put all of them up, that'd be great. So again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'll be focusing on the importance of family routines and rituals. And I'll begin with a quick definition so we're all on the same page. So routines are typically described as specific related repeated practices with a time commitment holding no special meaning. For example, brushing one's teeth before going to bed is an example of a routine. Washing your hands before eating or right after coming inside the house are also routines. Rituals, on the other hand, have a symbolic meaning that establish the understanding of what it means to be a member of a specific group, or in this case, a family. Now, rituals may include celebrations like a graduation, traditions like annual holidays and get-togethers, and pattern interactions such as a family meal. Research has suggested that these practices create feelings of control, structure, and security. So in other words, safety for all, particularly young children. It also allows for predictability, which has been linked to a sense of normalcy in one's lives. And through these practices, young children begin to learn about recall and time, which also helps when they're in school. And it also socializes them into knowing what's acceptable behavior in their culture and in society. So in other words, family routines and rituals provide a predictability structure to the day that guides behavior and development. Now, when routines are disrupted, they're often viewed as a hassle, right? Oh, shoot, my child didn't brush his teeth before going to bed, or I didn't put out my clothes before the night before. When rituals are disrupted, which they have for many, if not all of us due to COVID-19, for example, not being able to celebrate weddings or birthdays or continuing family traditions during the holidays, right? Family cohesion may be threatened. Which leads me to highlight that both routines and rituals serve important roles for maintaining the structure of family life. Kathy, can you go to the next slide, please? Now, research has suggested that there are 3 routines that we should mostly focus on and emphasize that we maintain. So we have morning and bedtime routines, mealtime routines, and physical activity routines. With morning and bedtime routines, we know that we all need sleep, right? Some more than others. And establishing a bedtime routine is one way to achieve that your child or teenager meets that requirement, as there's strong evidence that a good night's sleep is essential to our physical, mental, and emotional health. Now, for folks that are educators, which I could see many are, you might have witnessed a child come into your classroom or Zoom session super tired and sleepy. But we do know, and research has shown, that a lack of sleep impacts learning. Now, there are multiple reasons why children don't get enough sleep, and that's really a conversation for another day, but I'm happy to kind of talk about that in the Q&A. But there are ways to help children get enough sleep. It's suggested, as with everything we do, that to be consistent. So consistent with bedtime routines by starting around the same time each night and going in the same order, right? So baby bath time, reading a book, snuggles, right? Very similar to how Charlie talked about, and we do this again the next day. Many parents have find it helpful to create a bedtime routine chart with pictures, of course, depending on the age of the child, that reminds children what tasks need to be done and also in what order. Having a chart with morning routines, for example, what time to wake up, putting your clothes on, eating breakfast, as well as preparing the night before. So again, picking out clothes the night before has also helps. Now, with all routine charts, one needs to make sure that you allow enough time for your child to go at their own pace. So if you have multiple children or even just one child that takes a little bit longer to wake up compared to another, you want to make sure, again, going back to Kathy Main's point about understanding children's cues and really understanding that individual child and seeing them as their own. But also by having a morning routine, it really allows everyone, not just children, but also adults, to be there on time, right? Whether it's you need to go to be physically in a classroom or go to the dining room table for a Zoom session. For mealtime routines have also shown that they provide a sense of order to daily life, as it lets folks know what role everyone is expected to play, right? So who's setting the table, who's taking out the garbage, maybe who decides what to have for dinner. Now, what all of these might seem to be mundane tasks, they do create a feeling of control and self-efficacy. Now, studies have also suggested that setting a regular time and place for meal is a good start. Now, you want to be flexible, of course, with everybody's schedule, but having a set time and place allows everyone to know where they are expected to be and to set aside that time. Whether it's you're eating dinner at the couch or the dining room table, all family members ideally should know where dinner will be served. Another benefit of family meal times is that it encourages open conversation and communication. It provides families time to talk about events that happened that day, right? It allows families to reconnect and organize and plan for future events. Now, you might be thinking, gosh, we're all in the house because of e-learning and working remotely, but still mealtimes provide a space to reconnect with one another about each other's day. It also reinforces vocabulary development and problem-solving strategies. Lastly, with shared physical activity, we know that physical activity has been shown to reduce stress and improve the health and well-being of the individual and family, right? Specifically, Physical activity affects our ability to remember, to learn, plan, and concentrate. And this isn't just for children, it also goes for adults as well. Now, if space is limited, right, one could go and walk around the neighborhood, right, have a scavenger hunt inside or outside, depending on the weather, or even just having a dancing session in one's living room. Now, Kathy, can you go to the next one, please? The next one. There we go. Now, we know that creating a family schedule has the potential to help remind and support families with maintaining these family practices. Now, planning a schedule for a day or even a week is helpful for many families as it provides consistency and predictability, right? So here are just some examples, and as you could see, some are a little bit more creative than others, but at the end, they all say the same purpose of maintaining family consistency for children as well as for the adults in the household. And I do want to finish by saying that we all know that families are unique and that each of us have very specific routines and rituals that may look different from the person next to you, and that's okay. Now, while there are suggested best practices like the ones I mentioned here, it's really about finding what works for you and your family at a particular time, right? And I'll leave you with this message: the more routines and rituals a family has, the better members will work as a team and become stronger as a family. And depending developmentally on the age, right, having these routines and rituals also translate to better helping children prepare to be in the classroom, right? Depending on the age, there's routines that children follow. So having that linked from home to school and having that relationship allows for a lot of children to be able to navigate both spaces. So I'll end there and I'll have Dr. Humphreys go next.
Thank you, Dr. Koba. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about the impact that the social unrest that we're experiencing here in the United States is having on our kids across the developmental span. And one of the things I want to make to link up with Dr. Koba is the idea of routines provides that sense, as she noted, of support, of consistency, and also a sense of safety. And that's really important as we talk about issues related to unrest, social unrest. There's a lot going on. We have racial injustice, political unrest, and the impact, as Dr. Sheridan mentioned, of a global pandemic with the coronavirus. And so our kids are seeing and hearing what's happening. And you have to think about it from their perspective. This all seems overwhelming to them. And it's overwhelming to many of us, right? And so those routines can kind of provide that steadying space where they understand, like, okay, at least I know this is what's happening and I know what to expect, and I can, look forward to or understand what's coming next. And so the big piece of what's happening is that children have questions. As I said, they see and they're hearing everything. They have lots of questions, whether you are a caregiver or whether you are a teacher or youth worker, kids have questions. And so the thing that is important is allow them to have questions. One of the things that I often see is caregivers, teachers, we avoid their questions. Oftentimes we avoid them because we feel like we don't know what to say. But when you avoid the question, you actually are teaching the child that this is not an appropriate question and this is not something we should talk about. And this often happens as it relates to issues of race and ethnicity. This is not a space to be color blind, color avoidant. We have to answer their questions. And sometimes you might not know the answer. And guess what? You can tell the child, I'm not sure, but you know what? Let's look it up. We all have these lovely mini computers that sit in our pocket and purses called telephones, cell phones. We can pick it up and we can Google or ask Siri a whole bunch of things, right? And so don't avoid them. Don't avoid the question. Allow your child to ask, allow the children that you're caring for and teaching to ask questions. As Dr. Sheridan mentioned, when they're asking questions, we do want to provide answers, but we want to make sure we're providing answers to what they're actually asking. We may give way more information than what they need at the time. So one of the things that I suggest you do is when they ask a question, also broaden the concept. So if they're asking about, wow, I just saw on TV, there was a huge march downtown and people had up signs that said Black Lives Matter. Ask them, well, what do you know about it? What have you heard? So you get an understanding of where they're coming from and how to add more information and context. You want to be honest with children. Please don't lie. Oftentimes we think by lying that's helpful. It's not helpful. Be honest, but reassuring. So one of the things that I suggest is that sometimes caregivers or teachers will say, you don't have to worry, I will always protect you. That is actually not true. What is true is I will try my best to protect you. You cannot guarantee you can protect a child at all times. And if something happens to the child, they're going to go back and remember what you said. And now they're going to, in some ways, not completely trust you with other things. So you want to be honest, right? And say, I'm going to do my best to protect you the best I can. And then share with them how you would go about protecting them. What are some of the things that you would do? And then you can ask them, what would be helpful? What can we think about I do or we do that might make you feel more safe? It might make you feel more comfortable. The other thing is provide words with age-appropriate definitions. So, you know, what does race mean when you're 3 versus 9 versus 13 versus 17? What does equity mean? What does equality mean? Make sure you give definitions, don't shoo it away. And so that will require, Kathy, if you can advance the next slide, Dr. Sheridan. It's going to require you to do a little bit, you know, of work. So you may have to educate yourself. Well, what do I think race means? And what does equity mean? And there's a difference between equity and equality that people often confuse, right? So equality is about this idea of fairness and evenness, whereas equity, which is really the main issues that are out right now, whether it relates to political unrest, racial unrest, or the pandemic, is around equity. Are people getting the resources they need? If you don't need extra PPE because you have the finances to buy it and you have some at home, should you equally get the same amount as someone who has none? Equity would say no. You give what is needed to the person, not a kind of fair orientation. And you may have your own political views on a number of these issues, but it really is about being honest and clear with young people. The other thing I want to say is, yes, this is turbulent times, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but I also want to add the other side of this. There's so much push on what my kid isn't getting, what these children aren't getting, and there's a lack of focus on what they are getting. There are a lot of skills, positive skills that children are developing during this time. They've adjusted to remote learning. I mean, just think about that. Almost a year ago, we had to go into remote learning. Most of our kids now have gotten it. They know how to grab their device, log into Google Classroom, upload their homework, all these different things. They've adjusted to it. They may not love it, but they've adjusted. That's a skill, because in life, we're going to have things that we don't enjoy, but we have to adjust to. They've learned how to follow COVID health protocols. You saw that with Charlie. He knows before I go out, I get my mask, I put it on, I go out, I come in, I have my own kid sanitizer versus the adult sanitizer. I need to wash my hands. They've learned how to do these things. Yes, we have to support them. Yes, sometimes they don't want to wear a mask, but they've actually learned how to follow these procedures. They've engaged in them. They've learned new ways to play with friends. Many of you are concerned, like, my kids aren't, and their lack of being able to hang out with their friends socially or go to the park or have play dates. We've helped them find fun ways to play virtually. We've helped them find ways to connect with their peers. That's also a benefit for many of you who may have tweens and teenagers, which is a time for a great deal of social interaction. They figured out how to get online and play video games together, although they're spread all over the city or in other states, or for a couple of my kids' friends in another country with the internet, right? And so those are wonderful skills they can take with them. And the other piece I think is really important that many of us have seen, whether in our homes or in our virtual classrooms, or we've witnessed in social media on the news, is kids are helping others. They're organizing, they're finding out, wow, there's someone in my neighborhood who needs food or who needs masks or needs help in their yard because they can't go out, and they've organize these things. What can I do? Can I take some of my birthday money? Can I take some of, we organize donating snacks to someone? And so that idea of having empathy and being able to give and understand. Part of that is also understanding social justice issues that some people are without. That's a wonderful skill that kids have also developed during this time. I think go to the next slide. So what can you do? Again, I'm going to say it again. Dr. Sheridan said it as well. We want to be honest. We want to answer their questions. We want to reassure them. Think developmentally about what your child understands and use that language. Just like you have to developmentally explain something in the kitchen, like maybe you're cooking or you're out in the yard, you do the same thing for questions like race. What does race mean? Allow kids to express themselves. One of the things is we don't allow kids to talk a lot. We shush them often because we're uncomfortable with what they're asking, because we don't know what to say, or we don't maybe like what we realize is our answer. But we really need to hear from them. Let them talk. If your kid isn't a talker, let them express themselves in other ways. Especially with young kids, they like to draw, they build. You'd be surprised as to how they can share their emotions by building with blocks. They will tell you what they're building, why they're building it, who it's for, and you'll get a sense of, are they afraid about getting sick? Are they afraid about the unrest they saw on TV? Are they afraid that someone's going to storm into their house like they saw on TV because they heard people say the people's house? Those are real questions. So allow them to express themselves, performing, drawing, but do a lot more listening and less talking. I'm going to say that again, do a lot more listening and less talking. Your kids will realize they can come to you with these things that they're scared of or worried about, and then for other things that they experience in their life. They need you to be empathic, they need you to be calm, and they need you to be supportive. And I will add this piece. If your child sees you upset because you're upset about what you're seeing and what's happening, that's okay. You want to explain why you're upset, and then share with them how you're going to comfort yourself and what you need to do, and that it's normal to get upset, but this is how we respond, because that is modeling for your child, modeling for the children that you teach, that there is, that this is normal, to having a wide range of emotions, and that we all have to figure out how to handle them. So one of the things I just want to end with on my part is really thinking about, acknowledge, kind of like this 4 pieces. Acknowledge what's happening with your child, regardless of the age. Don't minimize how they're feeling. Don't tell them they shouldn't be angry or they shouldn't be sad or they shouldn't feel that way. Label it. Especially with young children, they often don't have words for their emotions. Their behaviors are their way of saying how they're feeling. So give them words and ask them if you're right or wrong. Validate, which means tell them that what they're feeling is right. What they're feeling is right. They can feel anything they want. Kids can feel anything they want. You have to get used to that. Yes, kids can be angry. They have every right to be angry. Now, we would say they don't necessarily have every right because they're angry to, let's say, destroy your living room. That's a behavior, right? But they can feel whatever. And then finally, plan. Create a plan with your child, with your teenager, for how they're going to cope with how they're feeling and how they're experiencing some of the turbulence that's happening in our society right now. So that's how I'll end with that. Professor Maine?
I think we're going to, thank you, everyone. That was, I actually learned a lot. I think we're going to open it up for questions, and our moderators are going to help facilitate that. And then we'll close out with a few things. So Karen, are you ready?
I just want to let you know that there are some resources in this that will be up later for you because the presentation will be accessible, but also I believe somebody's going to copy and put them in the chat for us. So I wanted to let you know that that was there, and I'm going to stop sharing so we can take questions.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, and we'll go ahead and put those in the chat. And I should have mentioned this before, the slides will be available in the next day or so online, and then the video will also be available. Let me start with thank you. What a wonderful presentation and so many things to think about. And one of my colleagues said, feels like we're doing better than we feel like we're doing. So it's been reaffirming too, some of the things that are happening. We've had a couple of questions coming in. Let me start with, and I think this is for any of the panelists, how can we support students who are grieving friends or loved ones that they lost from COVID?
I can jump in on that one. I started off. Anytime a child experiences death, it's very difficult. And as noted, younger children have a much harder time understanding what death means, the finality of it. But as it relates to COVID, I think a bigger issue is that can feel traumatic to young people, and trauma really is very individualized. So I don't use that word lightly. Everything is not traumatic to everyone, but the idea of death connected with an illness that everyone has in some way exposed to in their experience can feel that way. So the one thing is to try and find out from the child what they understand about death, like what they know, and then think about ask them what would make them feel better about honoring the person that passed away. The other issue that kids will have is they might worry that they may die. Don't say, you won't die, don't worry, because like I said earlier, you cannot guarantee that. Instead, you say, these are the things we're doing to keep us safe, to reduce our likelihood of contracting COVID, right? And for teenagers, what might be helpful to add to that is, then you can explain, this is why I won't let you go hang out with your friends the way you want to. It's not because I'm trying to be mean or not allow you to have a social life. I'm saying things that I've had to say myself to my teenagers, but I want to keep you as safe as I possibly can. And so the other piece I think of helping children manage death is oftentimes they actually have come up with ways to handle their grief, but we as the adults are uncomfortable with it because we're not comfortable with grief and we shut their way of coping down. You have to manage your own emotions in a way that don't prevent them from managing theirs the way that's helpful for them. So that requires you to do some of that self-reflection on your own time. How am I managing it? What can I do? How can I support? But I think it's important not to pretend like it doesn't, not to have conversations. Oftentimes the kids are going to want to talk about that person. And so it does require you, and you can explain if you get a little choked up, why that you miss the person, but you're glad that they're willing to talk about it because it continues to honor that person.
Yeah. And I've helped, I had to help a little boy who lost his father, and he was overwhelmed with grief, truly overwhelmed with grief. And he woke up 3 days later and came in and said, when I wake up, I feel okay, but then I remember what happened and I don't know what to do. I feel so terrible. And so I had to talk with him about how his dad would want him to have a good life and play again and feel good again. And we developed a routine together where in the morning when he got up, he would think about his dad and he'd light a candle and he would think about his dad and then he would go do the rest of his day. So it gave him a very specific time to grieve, and it gave him the permission to remove himself from it sometimes during the day and get on with the things that we kept reinforcing his dad would want him to do, which is go to school, play with his friends, have fun. So sometimes we do, it's helpful too. Dr. Humphries was talking about this, everybody grieves differently, kids do too. So sometimes they need the help of an adult to maybe help get away from their grief too sometimes, just through their basic daily activities.
Really great strategies. Thank you for sharing. Another question. The person asked, how do I not tire myself out trying to meet my daughter's social and emotional learning needs since she is an only child? And I didn't write it, even though I have an only child, but so I'd like to hear the answer.
I think maybe Dr. Koba or Kathy might have some responses for that as well, but that's a really good question and a really hard answer. Because you're going to feel exhausted. I wasn't an only child, nor did I have only one child, but I've certainly watched siblings and friends and others who have only children right now, and they're exhausted. They're really exhausted because they feel full responsibility of being everything right now to that child. So some suggestions, which you may or may not be able to do, would be to share the responsibility. One thing that my siblings did was reach out to their other siblings and said, would you be willing to do a Zoom with Mija on crafting for 30 minutes? And for this sibling, would you be willing to do this? And really tried to share the caregiving with friends and family who might even for a half hour take over for a little bit. One of the things for those of you who have young children that I've found kind of interesting is that some of our youngest children who have sort of been forced to do this screen time right now, they really don't think of it as fun anymore. They actually think of screen time as work, and they really resent having to go to the computer to do it. It's no longer fun. They don't want to do it, particularly first graders. And second graders are just like, you know, I want to do something. That computer is work to me. It's not fun. And so being able to also sort of stock up with things that your child likes that they can do. And it's okay to tell them to do some things alone, by the way. They can.
Kathy,
Go ahead.
I like to add, so I'm an only child and I was raised by a single mom, so hats off to her. And for her, it was these routines. Like she had to make, I mean, obviously she was flexible, but these routines of we're going to do this, and she always had something planned. So I know the libraries right now are closed, but growing up, we used to go to the library every Sunday. So that was a routine I always looked up to, and I could spend hours there. But I think oftentimes, especially now with e-learning, it's the routines are just helpful for yourself too, right? For not only including time to spend with your daughter and do some emotional coaching, but also to take care of yourself. And I think there's times where we focus so much on our children. And I don't have children at the moment, but it's also important to remember, how do you take care of yourself, right? How do you focus on yourself before you're able to go and practice SEL with your children? So I think that it's important to know that within routines and rituals, having time for yourself, but also understanding that the dollar store, right? Finding stuff that they're able to do on their own independence, that also helps. But I don't know if I have the right answer, but I just think it's not an easy answer, especially when you have to take into consideration the age of the child, but also developmentally where they are, right? And whether they have access to siblings, if they're able to do play groups or whatever that might be. So I'll stop there.
I'll just add to that, combining the idea of children being able to do things on their own, especially when they're younger. Set a timer. And so if you have a 4-year-old, the timer may only be set for 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and you build up, right? And you have them something to do, and you explain, okay, you're going to play with your Play-Doh for 4 minutes. I'm going to go over here and lay on the couch or read my book, or I don't know, put whatever for 4 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, I'm going to come back and connect with you, and let's see something. And then we can, so again, you're creating a routine, but you're also developing a skill, because they do need to learn how to do some things on their own, and it gives you a break. But I think the biggest thing I would also add to that that I think whether you have a child who has developmental needs that may need a lot more overseeing guidance, or whether it's an only child, is as a caregiver, give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. You're not going to be everything all the time, 100% A+. It's not going to happen. And so thinking through how to think about your day, and I think this is where routines can really, really be helpful, is how do you set it up so you can provide. And remember, developing one's social emotional competence skills is not just about interacting with others. It's about self-awareness and self-management. Those are the first two things we teach actually in SEL before we get to social. So that independence and learning to do some things on their own. So pull out all those games that they've gotten over the years, those board games they have gotten pushed to the back because they wanted to jump on your phone or their tablet. Now is the time that they can do it because they want to do something. And the other piece I'll say is sometimes caregivers, it's okay. You can play Uno for the 15th time. You'll be okay because they're having fun.
Well, and Dr. Humphries, as you talked about this, I was thinking we pulled out all the board games and they are fun and you forget about them. So that's been a nice, as you spoke earlier, it's been a nice reconnection and a positive out of all of this. And Dr. Sheridan, as you were talking, it takes a village. And so figuring out how to connect with that village through Zoom or these 30 minutes, come and do grafting, it's really great strategies you've all shared. Another question, and you've answered this a little bit, but if you could maybe touch more upon the second part. So the question is, the person asks, how do I help my elementary school age children manage such a long time with limited peer socializations? And what about teenagers?
Well, I would say one, I would change that because your kids are actually interacting with peers. So first you need to change your perspective. They actually are. They're just not doing it in person. So that's the first piece. And that's a part of the idea of grace. So I think the question really is, how do I help my kid around not being able to have that in-person interaction? And teenagers, I think, especially with your teenagers, acknowledge it. Actually tell them, I know this sucks. I know you'd rather be doing this, and this. I totally get it. Reminding why they can't, that might not make them feel better. But again, you're helping developing their critical thinking skills by doing that. And then brainstorming with them and with your younger kids. Well, since we can't do this, what can we do? When it was a little warmer, like, you might have been able to meet up outside if people had, been doing their bubble thing and wearing their mask. But talk with the child and come up with ideas. You'd be surprised. Oftentimes kids can actually come up with really great ideas. And you as the adult can help guide whether that's really feasible or not. I'll just add that.
Great. Does anybody else want to add any other thoughts? Okay. Well, I think we're almost at time. So if I could just ask you all to wrap up and just give us some parting thoughts, takeaways. If there's one thing you want people to take, and you've given such great knowledge and really comforting knowledge that people are doing the right things or on the right path in these very difficult times. I'm seeing some shaking heads up and down, so I think people are agreeing. But any sort of last thoughts or takeaways?
Sure. I'll close it out with just a couple things I hope you all take away today with, and sort of stealing Marisha's words about changing your perspective and really seeing the positives in these really difficult times. And I want to remind everyone that we're always learning. And even when we look at the schedules that are out there that people are making, they're like learning time, academic time, school times. Yes, that's important, but we are always learning. So you're learning when you're helping prepare breakfast. You are learning during what's called the fun family time. You are, everyone is always learning. So I think, again, the sense of grace, the sense of relax a little bit, like we are not, this is not causing, all of our children to go brain dead. Because they're not in school. They are still learning, and they're learning a lot of things that are actually going to help them and be very supportive of maybe when they return to school. So take that with you and hold that with you. And then also hold with you what your role is being that secure adult in children's lives. And whether it has to do with how you're modeling, emotions that are really difficult to deal with, or whether it is the part where you're able to be really responsive to the kinds of things children are saying, through being honest and upfront and constantly reassuring, and try to keep your own sense of calmness. Who you are and what you do is going to have an impact on the lives of the children that are in your care. So thank you so much for coming. I hope this was really helpful. Please check out all of our resources that were put together, and I hope everyone really takes care and stays safe.
Well, let me just add thank you to all of you for spending your time. We know that you are all so busy as faculty members, but this has really been an incredible presentation and discussion. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and all the positivity around it. It's really wonderful. Let me just conclude real fast and say, please join us on Wednesday, January 27th at noon Central Standard Time for our next Alumni Exchange event, featuring 2 UIC faculty experts, one again from the College of Education, who will present What Does Defund the Police Mean for Schools? In this interactive discussion, they will talk about how policing happens in schools and what a police-free school could look like. To find recordings of this episode and also all of our other programs, please do again go to go.uic.edu/alumni exchange. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you could fill out the survey for us that you will receive via email, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists and faculty members. We're so proud that you are faculty at UIC and are grateful for all the incredible work and research you are doing. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in another UIC Alumni Exchange program. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye.